Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast, Smart Man, Smarter Woman, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And thank you so much for joining us today. I am Steve Lotz.
And I am Juliet Aurora.
And we are your co-hosts. And before I introduce our special guest for today, perhaps my wonderful co-host, the smarter woman herself, Juliet, would like to say a few words. How are you doing today, Juliet?
I am excellent. Thank you, Steve. It actually was a great morning. So even though I've been very upset that my pool has closed for it's only been a week, but it feels like it's been months since it's been closed. My puppy and I, our puppy and I, have gotten into this walking groove in the morning that has replaced my swimming time. And we had a great walk, so it was a great way to start out the day. So I am excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. So you are wide awake, but I do see, which no one else can see, our puppy is sleeping.
Yes, he's fast asleep in the background.
Apparently you must have worn him out. Yeah. So anyway,
he is 10. So
yeah, well, and 10 in dog years is a little more than 10 in human years. But anyway, so we've got a great show for you today. We have a very special guest. His name is Marco Robert. So let's bring in the guest, Marco, and welcome and thank you for joining us today from sunny Arizona.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm super excited to be here.
Our pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Marco's background, he's a speaker, management consultant, but over the last 2 decades, he's delivered his messages to audiences in over 30 countries around the world. And his message is something that should certainly interest and resonate with our audience, and that is, what is the profile of a successful entrepreneur, and how can you grow and scale your business? He's also the creator of his own business management methodology called BOSS, which is used by thousands of companies worldwide to help them pinpoint their own challenges and then find some solutions. But before we get into his business management system and how to grow and scale your business, maybe for the first few minutes, Marco, you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about, who you are, what do you do, who do you help, and a little bit about your own entrepreneurial journey as to what got you to where you are today.
Awesome. I thank you so much, Steve, and thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm so excited. The first thing I need to say is that I'm actually Canadian. I was born and raised in a little town up north, basically smash on the border of Quebec and Ontario, but on the Quebec side. And I grew up in a family where my parents actually went from being nurses to starting a business when I was 9 years old. So I kind of grew up in this world of business. My parents actually owned restaurants when I was a kid. So going through high school, I was kind of the odd kid because I always knew I was going to be a business owner. See, when my friends wanted to become engineers and doctors and nurses and firemen, I've always known that I was going to be a business person. So it made sense for me to actually, after serving in the military, to go back to school and graduate with a business degree. And at first I wasn't sure. I didn't feel I had the confidence to start my own business. I certainly did not have the finance to start my own business. So I worked, my degree is in hospitality management. So I worked in the hotel and restaurant industry for a few years. And then one day I said, okay, you know what? I think I figured this stuff out and I'm going to start my own company. So like a good student of business, I put together a nice business plan and I walked into my local bank and I said, look at my business plan. I need to raise some money because I want to start my own business. The gentleman looked at me. He flipped through the pages of my business plan and then he grinned and I think he actually laughed and he said, basically that's what he said. He said, kid, nobody's going to give you money, right? And I had worked on this business plan for months, right? And the fact that this guy laughed at me, I was so angry. Now, I don't want to put down any Canadian bank, so I'm not going to say the name of the bank. I guess I could just probably say, the initials. It starts with a T and it ends with a D. But that guy laughed me out of the bank, right? So I walked out of the bank and I was really angry. And for several days, I was distraught and I didn't know what to do. After 3 or 4 days, I started to pick myself up. And then I thought to myself, you know what? This guy is not going to define my life. This guy is not going to decide what's going to happen for me. What does he know about me? He doesn't know anything about me. And I could have gone back. I had a really good job. I was managing in Quebec, there's this franchise that's very similar to TGI Fridays. So if you know TGI Fridays, I was basically managing a TGI Fridays, right? It's called the Sports Cage in Quebec. And it's a good job. I was making good money and I could have just gone back and do that. But I remember turning to my fiance at the time and saying, we need to figure this out because there's no way I'm going back to getting a job. And then we rolled up our sleeves, and to make a very, very long story short, we ended up leaving Canada, moving to Central America. We started 2 different restaurants in a small town called Antigua, Guatemala. At the end, we had about 50 employees. We sold our mini portfolio of restaurants. And by the time I was 30 years old, I was sitting on the beach in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I was, quote unquote, retired. I was worth more than 7 figures and I had achieved my dream, right? And today, when I look back at the journey, I can see that moment at the TD Bank as a defining moment of my life. Because, it would have been so easy to give up at that point. It would have been so easy to give up and just, my girlfriend had a really good job. She worked for the Quebec government. She was in the hospital system, in the healthcare system, in the laboratory. She had a good job, like a career. She could have stayed there for the rest of her life. I had a good job, but we decided to take the entrepreneurial journey, and it's completely changed me. I would not be where I am today. If I showed you where I'm from, if I pinpointed on the map, it's nobody leaves that place. You understand? Nobody, it's a good place to grow up, but it's kind of the end of the world. You don't drive through my region. You go there and then you go there. That's it. It's a very, very small place. The entire county has only 15,000 people. So it's pretty cool that I was able to kind of escape and move on through my journey, and all because of my entrepreneurial spirit.
Excellent. I love that story.
Great.
I always love hearing where there's one defining moment. When we ask a lot of the guests who come on the show, what is it that made you become an entrepreneur or decide to become an entrepreneur? And for some of them, it's because, their parents were entrepreneurs or they had this calling. But I love it when there is a defining moment that you can actually say, here is where I realize that this is my calling, and love it. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no, that was great. I would like to get into a little bit now, Marco, if it's okay with you. I'm intrigued by one of the things I found out about you, whereas you talk about what is the profile of a successful entrepreneur. So can you talk a little more for me? We meet lots of entrepreneurs. We're entrepreneurs ourselves, and men, right? They're, different kinds of people. So I'd really love to get a little more about what you've discovered is the profile of a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I've always wanted to be a business owner. So right after college, I started to read a lot. So I was in my early 20s, and I came across, I don't know if you guys remember Tony Robbins. He was on TV 24/7 in the early 1990s. So I bought his course. It was a big deal for me. I think I paid $325 for his course. I was not making $325 per week at that time, right? So that was a big deal for me. But it opened up my perspectives about the world. And I started to say, okay, well, I probably need to step up my game. I need to take more responsibility about myself. So I started to read, and I read extensively to the point where there were days where I would read 3 books on the same day. I took some speed reading classes, and I couldn't stop. I was devouring information. And at some point I came to this realization. I realized that the differentiating factor between success and failure in business came down to systems. So organizations or companies that actually were built on a foundation of systems tend to succeed much better, right? In the proof is in the pudding, like they say. If you look at corporate organizations, they're systemized. If you look at franchises, they're systemized. If you look at independently owned businesses, they're usually not that systemized, and they fail at an alluring rate. Where franchises tend to survive much longer, right? They tend to have a much greater rate of success. So that was a theory. I'm 23 years old. I come up with this theory. If I systemize everything, it's going to work. So I was managing a hotel in Montreal, Canada at the time, and I went back to work and I started to systemize. It was a concept, a theory. So I systemized the way we were taking on reservations, how we greeted the customers when they came in, how the banquet department was actually operating. I systemized the housekeeping, how to clean a room. I remember dividing the room, I think, into 4 areas. And then, we increased the time we reduced the amount of time that the average maid would take to clean up a room. So we went from, I think a maid was cleaning 8 rooms per day, and then we went to above 10 room. So a lot of things like that. I was just systematizing, and it worked. And in 1993, 1994, when Canada was going through a recession, most of the hotels in Montreal were actually declining. My hotel was doing better, so that was pretty cool. So, and then I got hired by this restaurant that I'm telling you about, this TGI Fridays. And I did the same thing, I just walked in, and with my team of other managers, we basically systemized everything. And then we took a restaurant that was losing about $100,000 a year, turning it around in about 1 year. The owner actually made $100,000, right? So he went from losing 100,000 to netting over 100,000. So that was a big deal. So that's when I said, okay, well, if it's system, let me just start my own company. So I flew to Central America, and then I systemized my businesses. It worked. I find myself on the beach, enjoying a pretty good life. And I'm like, wow, I figured it out, right? What I had not figured out, by the way, is how to be an investor, okay? So that winter, I invested a lot of money with a partner of mine, and the guy ended up running away with most of my money. So I lost a lot of money in the winter of 2000. So I had to reinvent myself. I said, okay, well, I'm 30 years old. What am I going to do? So my wife and I ended up moving to California, and she had a career. So she worked in the laboratory business. And I said, okay, well, maybe I can parlay my experience and education and business track record into consulting. So that's when I started my consulting practice. And my process was very simple. Hey guys, I figured it out. I know to become successful, all we have to do is systemize everything. That's what I did. I worked with clients and I systemized everything. But sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. And I could not figure out why. Literally, I would work with 2 different businesses and implement the same strategies, the same systems, the same methodology, have the same conversation with 2 business owners. And one would his business would explode. And the other one would be like, whoa, I don't know what's going on. It's not working. And I could not figure this out to save my life. In fact, it was keeping me up at night because it was starting to affect my reputation, because these people who were not seeing success became disgruntled. And then they would be like, hey, you know what? I paid you a lot of money. And one day I was actually attending a speech from another consultant, a friend of mine. His name was, I'll remember his name, Knut. His name is Knut Schroeder. He was from Europe somewhere, maybe Germany or something like that. And he was speaking about the power of business and systems and all. We understood each other really well. And then he said, but you guys have to remember that businesses are first built on a foundation of human beings. And I'm like, oh my God, it was the missing link. It was the missing link. At that moment, it's like my entire life unraveled. I understood that the reason why I had succeeded in business is because I was the kind of guy that was not going to allow, some banker at TD to come and tell me not to do it, right? And the reason why my client was succeeding is because he was that same kind of guy. And the reason why that other client was not succeeding is because he was not that kind of guy. And I'm like, whoa, that night, I remember it was an evening presentation. I didn't sleep that night. I went back home and I'm like, oh my God, I figured it out. There's a profile. There is a profile of a successful person. And then I spent the next several years trying to understand what that profile was. Now, if you look me up, you'll find out that I have interacted with, Hollywood celebrities, billionaires, multi-millionaires. I have clients all over the world, and I've been very fortunate and privileged to hang out with a lot of very, very, very successful people. So what I've done over the last 15 years or so is I have codified that person. Who's that person? Now, first of all, I had to give it a name. I called the person the outlier entrepreneur, right? Why? Because outlier means, you're willing to be different, right? You're willing to stand out. That's an outlier. And the entrepreneur, because to me, there's always been a difference between being an entrepreneur and being a business person. You're a business person. Okay, bravo, you own a business. Okay, so, hey, congratulations, you started a business, you're a business person. An entrepreneur is more, it's in the makeup of who you are. It's in your philosophy. The entrepreneur, and by the way, the word entrepreneur means a person who undertakes. That's a French word. It means the person who undertakes. So what do they undertake? What do entrepreneurs undertake? Well, they undertake to save the world. They undertake to find solutions. They undertake to create value. That's what entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs find solutions to all sorts of problems because they want to profit from it, right? The business person is like, okay, hey, I own a business. I hope somebody's going to come to my business. And then you can hear, birds chirp. Nothing happens. But the entrepreneur is like, okay, hey, there's a problem in my community. There's a problem in this industry. And it is my job to figure it out. It's my job to create value. I cannot monetize somebody that is not valuable. It's a completely different thinking. So the person who achieves a lot more is actually an outlier, somebody who is self-affirmed, not afraid to stand up for who they are, right? Outlier. And also someone who is devoted to the creation of value for the world, the entrepreneur.
We will continue with our conversation right after this message from a friend of the show. AIS Solutions is an award-winning cloud accounting firm serving small business all across Canada. If you want to migrate to a powerful and effective paperless accounting system and get your financials wherever you are, whenever you want them, then contact AIS Solutions team of trained professionals today at www.aissolutions.ca. And now, back to our conversation.
Right? Now, this it's kind of the story. I'm happy to go into details because what I did is I broke down, that person into what it means to be an outlier entrepreneur. But that's kind of the story of how I came up with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. That would lead me to I think another question then. If someone came to you and, they're thinking they're an entrepreneur, they're thinking they want to start their own business, but they have no experience of being an entrepreneur, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Wow. Well, so because first of all, I'm very systematic in that process. And I do have a system for addressing and answering that question. First of all, we need to understand where the person fits on the gradient scale of building a business. There's many different levels. Where are you? The first question I ask, and by the way, if you go to my website, marcorobert.com, you'll see at the top, I ask that question. And the question is this. You want to start a business. Okay. Now let me ask you a question. If somebody came to you and offered you a really good job, where you get paid a good salary and you have the kind of benefits that you feel are good benefits, and they can kind of guarantee that job, would you take the job? And if the person says, yeah, of course. Of course. I say, okay, don't start a business. Go find that job. Go find the job. Because there is not a single entrepreneur on this planet who would take that job. Entrepreneurs don't take the job. Now, business owners would. Entrepreneurs don't take the job. There is not an amount of, because we don't work for money. We don't work for security. We have a flame that is driving us. I'm driven by a flame. I'm driven to an expansion of myself, you know? And that's the first thing that needs to happen. If you don't have that, and by the way, some of my clients have gone back, and actually, I'm thinking of one very specifically. I've worked with hundreds of people, but I have one in my head right now. He's in Norway, and he had been struggling in his business. And when I asked him this question, he said, "Of course I would take the job." And I said, "Go get the job." And this guy was highly educated. He wanted to start a consulting practice, and he had been struggling for a couple of years and investing money and losing money, and he was not going anywhere. So I said, "Go get a job." And in the last 4 or 5 years, he's made probably about $1.7 million working as a consultant. He's getting a job and slowly taking on. So the first couple of years, that's all he did. He had a job. He's a highly educated guy, speaks several languages, had a lot of experience. He was making about $250,000 per year in his job. So he did well the first couple of years, and he was able to pay back his debt. He was able to rebuild the foundation of his marriage, because it was, he was trying to start a business and he was not. So his marriage was getting affected by that. And then after a couple of years, he called me back. I coached him more. Then he ended up starting to take on some clients part-time. He's done very, very well. And now he's ready. Now he's probably going to actually quit his job. Now he's sitting on a great portfolio. He's put probably $400,000 or $500,000 in his retirement account in the last 5 years. He's been able to pay back all of his debt. He's had a good lifestyle, spent a lot of time with his kids. And now he's like, you know what? I think I'm ready to actually go back. It's 5 years. Yeah, the guy was like 36 maybe when I met him. He's probably about 40, 41 right now. No big deal, right? And in the process, he became an entrepreneur, right? So what kind of advice? Sorry?
So do you think that being an entrepreneur is something that you can learn as opposed to something that you're born with?
I think yes. Yes, I believe that you can learn it. I believe, but you need to want to learn it. You understand? Some people, and I'll tell you how I see it. Okay, I'll explain to you how that works. I think we can divide the entire world into two groups of human beings, and the small minority is these outlier entrepreneurs. It's a small minority. Okay, 4, 5, 6, 8%. I don't know what it is, but it's a very small minority of human beings that are already outlier entrepreneurs. The rest of the world is what I call normal, average, ordinary people, right? And I have lived in 5 countries, and I've traveled to probably another 30 countries. And no matter where you go around the world, you'll find there are normal, average, ordinary people. Now, the normal, average, ordinary people in Canada are slightly different than the normal, average, ordinary people in the United States. They're very different than the normal, average, ordinary people in Mexico or Guatemala or the Bahamas, where I lived as well for a while. But there's this group, and it's the vast majority of people. They're just normal. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a normal person, right? Your parents, the people who raised you were normal. Your neighbors are normal. Your kids are normal. Your cousins are normal. Most people are normal. They fit in. And it's totally fine. It becomes wrong when you want to raise your hand to the world and say, I want more. I want more out of this life, Marco. I expect more. I want the luxuries of life. I want the lifestyle. I want the relationships. I want the connections. I want the fancy watches. I want the trips. I want more. But I also want to be like my cousin Jerry. See, that's where the disconnection happens. So that's the first step. You need to be willing. You need to be willing. So what I find is that in the vast majority of human beings who are normal, average, ordinary people, you have probably about 20% who have the flame. That's what I call it. The flame is still scintillating, the flame is still burning. And they're like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I can feel something inside of me. I don't know what it is, but I can feel something. I feel like I was born for something bigger than this. And they're willing to explore that flame. Those people I can help, right? Those people I can help. I can push them to becoming outlier entrepreneurs. But the people who don't even have the flame, the people who are not even looking for it, I mean, I cannot help those people. I don't even try. So the people who are listening to your podcast, I'm going to make a big assumption. A lot of them are part of that 20%. A lot of the people, probably a vast majority of the people who actually are listening to your podcast are part of that 20%. And you probably have a small percentage of people who are already outlier entrepreneurs. Because outlier entrepreneurs are always looking for ways to better their life. They're always looking. We spend our lives looking for information like you guys are providing on this podcast, because if I can find one thing, one little thing, one distinction, it's going to change my life. So while the average guy out there might be watching the Saturday night hockey game, the outlier entrepreneur is actually listening to a podcast Saturday night, trying to figure out what's the one thing I can understand to help my clients, to help my life, to help my family, to move the world 1 inch further. So that's what it is. That make sense?
Yep.
Definitely. And I guess more than anything, you've made it sound very exciting to be an entrepreneur. That I hope that our audience who are listening, who are mostly, they might all be entrepreneurs other than, immediate family and friends that we kind of say, hey, go listen to our podcast. That I hope that they're patting themselves on the back or recognizing how unique of individuals that they are.
I mean, it's the most, I'm going to tell you something. If you look at it from a biological perspective, it is encoded in our DNA. It is. You see, most people do not choose to be outlier entrepreneurs, but we are all born outlier entrepreneurs. It's encoded in the DNA. It's to help one another, to create solutions for the community, to help each other, support each other, is encoded in our DNA. Look it up. Seriously, I'm not joking, okay? And that's the reason why human beings today thrive on this planet and monkeys don't. Because, a million years ago, there was not a big difference between monkeys and human beings. Why is it that we thrive? Well, biologists and other groups of scientists tell us that it's because there's this yearning that seems to be encoded in our DNA. This yearning to help one another, this yearning to exchange value with one another. So, but we live in a world that is so thriving. We do so well that you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You can just be, you can skate by for the rest of your life and just think, because with technologies and with advancements in science and so on and so forth, one entrepreneur can basically change the world and make the world a much better place for everybody else. So to me, it's just the most enthralling thing. It's part of who we are, right? So
exciting, very exciting.
It is, and I think it was described to me once, and I don't remember who said it to me now, but we were talking about the differences between the entrepreneurial mentality and the mentality of a business person or someone who is quite happy working for someone else and they're living a happy life. They're happy people. But what is the difference? And it was described to me as it's like two rides at the fair. And one is the roundabout and one is the merry-go-round and the other one is the roller coaster. And the entrepreneur looks for that roller coaster. You talk about it's in their DNA, but there's also something inside that entrepreneur who, no, I don't want to be going on that merry-go-round. I want to go on that roller coaster over there. Knowing, as with every roller coaster, right, there's downs, right? It's not a steady ride up. But the ride is something every entrepreneur needs and enjoys. And I thought that was a really great way of describing, it's a generalization for sure, but it's a great way of describing the mentality of an entrepreneur versus that, someone who's very, very happy working for someone else. So I agree 100%. That was great.
We would rather have ups and downs instead of the boring steadiness of a merry-go-round.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that brings us to the part of the show called the Smart Man, Smarter Woman version of James Lipton's Actor Studio, where we ask all of our guests 6 questions, the same 6 questions, And if you're ready to go, Marco, I'd like to get started on it.
Go for it.
All right. Question number 1. What one word best defines an entrepreneur?
Outlier.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
None.
Okay.
0. I'm very, very happy in what I do. In fact, I always, I tried this thing called retirement when I was in my early 30s, and I made a decision. I'm never even going to retire. I already, some months I work 12 months, like this year, because we've been cooped up. But there's months where I work 5 or 6 months, and I will never stop. I'm going to be in my 80s, and I'm still going to be working, because this is not, to me, the lines between working and enjoying my life are blurred. It's the same thing. See, you could say that what I'm doing right now is work, right? Because I'm kind of here to promote what I do and to let the world know about Marco Robert. But look at how much fun we're having, right? So to me, it's the same. So I'm never going to stop doing this. So I would not trade this with anything else. And people sometimes come to me and say, you're very lucky that you have found what you actually are meant to be. And yes, you can call it luck, you can call it, discernment, you can call it obsession, passion, whatever you want to call it. But I am extremely, extremely happy to be what I am. I will never do anything else.
Well, that's great. And I can tell you, out of all the episodes we've done, you are only the second person to answer that question with, I don't want to try anything else. I'm perfectly happy doing what I'm doing. So that's great. What profession would you like never to attempt?
Oh, I have so much respect for school teachers, to unruly kids. So I don't think that would work for me, to actually try to, I don't have, it's not in my makeup to actually, to herd all of these kids and teenagers. I'm just looking at who I was when I was in high school. Man, I would not have wanted to be my teacher. So I have the most respect for those people, and I would not want to attempt to do this. While I like to teach, I love to teach and train, and I do seminars and I organize conventions and events, but I train people who want to be trained, to try and force someone to say, you have to learn your ABCs and you have to learn your multiplication tables. And no, not for me.
Fair enough. What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, wow. The first thing that came to my mind when you said that is I have a beautiful, beautiful memory. I was in my early 30s and we lived in, actually I was in my late 20s and I lived in Guatemala. And we found this deserted beach in a place called Monterrico in Guatemala. There was nobody. It's on the Pacific Ocean, and the sand is black. It's black beach. It's amazing, most amazing thing. And nobody was there. And my ex-wife and I sat in front of the beach and we looked at the sun setting for like 2 hours. Neither of us said a word. And all we did is look at the ocean and hear the sound of the waves crashing. Sometimes if I'm going through a stressful moment in my life, I take myself back to that moment, sitting on that beach in Guatemala and just listening to the waves crashing on the beach. It's one of the most calming and one of the most beautiful sounds I've ever experienced.
Awesome. What book would you recommend every entrepreneur should read?
Oof. I love that you're asking me that question because I'm a huge reader. I believe in reading a lot. There are so many. Yeah. And when people come to me, it's kind of a case by case. But there is one that is shocking that will allow you to discover who you are, that will give you a perspective on life that very few books can actually give you a perspective like that on life. It's going to make you reassess who you are and try to understand who you are. And that book is called Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. It was one of the most powerful books I've ever read. Not that I agree with everything, but it's a very, very powerful book. And The book is 1,300 pages long. So it's almost like you have to climb the Mount Everest. The first 400 pages, you want to shoot yourself in the head. Nothing happens for 400 pages. You understand? And if I hadn't, if one of my mentors hadn't urged me to read the book, I would have never read that book, because it's a work of labor to read that book. But who you are at the end of the book is a completely different person than who you were at the beginning of the book. And who you are at the end of the book is much more aligned with who you're supposed to be, with the essence. I think that book allows you to discover the truest essence of who you are. So that's a great book. I invite everybody to read it.
Okay. When your own entrepreneurial journey is completed, what do you hope your legacy is?
Oh, wow. Great question. This is something that I've been thinking a lot about, in the last year or so. I'm 50 years old, and my fiance is much younger than me, and we decided to have a child. I've never had kids, so I have a 6-month-old little boy. And for the first time, legacy was always kind of in the back of my mind. Now it's at the forefront of what I think about all the time. And I think what's going to happen is I'm gearing up to creating some sort of an entrepreneurship institution, kind of an institute of entrepreneurship that will outlast me, that will continue to teach my methodologies to business owners and entrepreneurs for decades and decades to come. So that's what we're looking at setting up right now. We're working on that. So that's probably
terrific.
Probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a great
Look for it.
That's a great.
The Marco Robert Institute of Entrepreneurship. That's probably what it's going to be called.
Absolutely, we'll keep our eye out for it. That's great. Well, as we're drawing to a close here with this episode, do you have any final words, Marco, you would like to share with our audience?
Absolutely. One thing I want to say is this. First of all, I really, really, really enjoyed this. I think you guys, I like the way that you're presenting this. It's pretty awesome that you're doing this service to the community. So you guys are totally outlier entrepreneurs just by the fact that you're willing to devote so much energy to a group of people. And I actually recorded a course. It's a 12-day course that I did recently, and we're gearing up to actually selling it. So we're going to create a web page and stuff, and so on and so forth. But everyone who's listening to this, if they actually want to have access to the course, I'll give it to them for free. All they have to do is send me and my team an email, and all you have to do is in the subject of the email write podcast, and then ask for the course. It's called the Outlier Entrepreneur Course, and it's a journey of who you need to be to become an outlier entrepreneur. And we're probably going to be selling it for $1,000, $800, $2,000. I'm not sure exactly how much we're going to sell it for. But everybody who's listening to this, if you want to just send an email to contact@marcorobert.com. That's MARCOROBERT.com. So contact@marcorobert.com. And again, just mention podcast and say, I would love to have access to the 12-day course, and we'll send it to you for free.
Perfect. And we'll make sure that information goes in the show notes as well with that email address. Thank you for that. That's a great offer to our audience. And Juliette, do you have any final words before we close it down for another episode?
I guess more than anything, I'm just so excited that I'm an entrepreneur. Marco has made me, there's so many people that yes, I'm a business person, or yes, I'm an entrepreneur, but don't really recognize how unique it is. So I guess thank you for that. You've just, I guess, made me feel more proud that I am part of that designation of entrepreneurs.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate you saying that. I was in Pakistan exactly a year ago speaking at a conference, and basically what I shared with you here is kind of what I shared on stage at that conference. And somebody just reached out to me, a kid that I met at that conference. And, there were thousands and thousands of people. It was an international convention. And he said, ever since you left Pakistan, Marco, everybody's still talking about you because of that talk, because you ignited something inside of us. And so there's nothing that actually makes me more proud of what I do than when I hear people like him, that kid, his name is Abdullah, and then you saying something like that, because this is my mission. That's what I live for. I live to help people recognize their truest identity, which is the identity of of that outlier entrepreneur or that entrepreneur that lives inside of us, right? So thank you so much for saying that, Juliet. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And that brings us to this episode's words of wisdom. And I like this one. It's from Brendan Burchard. And it is, when you knock on the door of opportunity, do not be surprised if work answers.
Perfect.
I'll let you think about that one. And so, again, thank you very much, Marco, for joining us. Thank you very much, Juliet, my awesome co-host. But most importantly, as always, thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in and giving us a listen. We sincerely hope you found some value here today, and I'm pretty sure you did. And if you like the podcast, we'd love it if you subscribe. You can find us in all the normal places. You know what they are. Or you can go to the website, smartmansmarterwoman.com. So thank you again. Until next time, take good care of yourself and those that you love. Bye for now.